or a erotic chatbot that is maybe trying to sell the product.
Yeah. I'm happy to try and complete your sentences, but not one where you started with erotic chatbot. that I feel like is too dangerous.
That's fair. This is Philosophy, Programs, and Prompts, a podcast where two real humans limit our vices and wonder if AI can save the day, or if it's just going to make the world worse. I'm Carl Brown.
And I'm Casey Hart.
And today we're talking about AI virtue ethics. Now, Casey, you're the philosopher among us. You want to define AI virtue ethics for us?
Yeah. So when we talk about ethics, just broadly speaking, ethics asks the question, how should I act? And usually we're talking about morality, right? Like, should I tell white lies? Am I allowed to murder people? Which conditions can I, harm somebody else only in self-defense, whatever. That's talking about ethics. And then among ethics, there are different types of ethicists. There are applied ethicists who ask like specific questions about how should I act in these circumstances. There are normative ethicists who say like, what's the right theory about ethics? Like, how do I decide whether an act is better or worse, generally speaking? And then there's meta ethicists. And that's a whole other kettle of fish. But on the normative ethics side, there are a couple of different frameworks that people use. So one of those is something like deontology, which is a duty-based way to view ethics. And then there's consequentialism, which is a consequence-based view of ethics. And then there's virtue ethics. So we can distinguish those a little bit. So let's say that I told you a lie yesterday, Carl. I'm sorry. I'm just going to admit it now. Like, how would we go about evaluating whether that was a good action or not? Now, if you're a deontologist, you say, like, you have a duty not to lie. There's, like, rules, hard and fast rules, and I violated that rule, so it was wrong. That's a deontological approach. A consequentialist approach might say, like, because I lied, I made you sad, right? And happiness is morally valuable, so doing things that have negative consequences are morally bad. So that's like utilitarianism is a consequentialist framework. Virtue ethics is a whole different approach to things. It's actually it was like coming into ethics, I didn't think that much of it. And then spending a lot more time as a philosopher, now I find myself identifying as a virtue ethicist the most. And virtue ethics is about promoting virtues, as the name suggests. But it's how can we be the sorts of people that are virtuous people? And I use a metaphor for sports a lot, mostly just because I love those metaphors. But if you're talking about what would make a great basketball player, you're thinking, okay, they're tall or they're good at ball handling or they're good at shooting. Like these are skills, features, properties that are good making for a basketball player. And you ask the same question about humans. Like what makes someone a good human? Now, just like basketball players, there are lots of ways that you can be a good basketball player. Like you could be a good point guard or a shooting guard or a center. They have different attributes. And maybe there are lots of ways to be a good person. But I think we can think about some of those characteristics, right? You want somebody who's honest and courageous and funny and, good to be around, kind. So those are the virtues. And the questions that we're going to ask if we want to do AI virtue ethics is how does AI fit into the picture of creating and promoting virtues in humans?
Right. Now, before we get started, we want to talk about one thing we're not really going to talk about today, which is the ethics of how AIs were trained. That's a big topic. There's a lot of controversy about that. And today, when we're talking about how AI may or may not make things better or worse, we're going to take the idea of whether or not they were trained ethically or, unethically off the table, and we'll save that for a future episode. So we're not talking about how the AI got here today. We're just talking about the implications of it now that it exists.
Right. So if these models were all trained up on stolen, intellectual property from people, that can be bad. It can be morally bad. It can be not virtuous. And that's worth talking about. Like that's relevant. But from this perspective, okay, once we've got the AI, like how does using it conform to making me a better person or not? Let's just sort of take for granted that some of that stuff shows up.
And then the other thing is we're going to try to work with or talk about the AI more or less as we have it now, as opposed to some of the super claims about what AI will do when it becomes sentient or, a deity or whatever that we've talked about in some other episodes, and I'm sure we'll talk about more. So this is more about not necessarily exactly what AI can do right now, but the generation of the generative AI that currently exists and how it can be applied and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because we're coming out of this discussion of like AGI and ASI, and like you and I are both pretty skeptical about a lot of the claims that people are making. But I don't want us to come across as just haters of AI either. I think
Sure.
both of us have positive visions of that, and this is a way for us to kind of like here in that middle, like realistic road for the sort of artificial intelligence that we have right now and will reasonably expect to have in the next several years. Like, how can we shape that to make us the sort of folks we want to be?
All right. So let's start with a positive note. So, what are the ways that AI is actually helping people to be better or more virtuous at the moment, in your estimation?
Oh man! So this is where if I pause, I think that is maybe telling of how little virtue I think. No, here's a positive. I think a lot more people are emboldened to try out stuff that they wouldn't try before. So, I mean, myself included, I'm not a great programmer, but I'm like, you know what? I can try and build a UI because I can just let some of these LLMs help me build one. And like that will sort of limit the barrier to entry. And I think that helps people dream bigger. So I'm seeing that. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, so I would probably start with the accessibility implications of AI, right? The amount of text to speech and speech to text for folks that are visually impaired or folks that are that have hearing problems. I remember when the iPhones were early on, there was this service that you could subscribe to where a blind person or a person who was visually impaired could like take a picture of the shopping center they were in and be like, okay, the GPS has led me to this location, but I don't know which of these doors is the correct door. And they would text you a picture and you'd be like, okay, it's the third one from the left or whatever. And now a lot of times that kind of thing can be done with a visual recognition LLM. So that lets people be a lot more autonomous. So I think I'm probably going to get canceled for this, but I mean, that seems to me like a clear good with not a lot of downsides. There might be some downsides that I haven't thought about, but that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah. And those are both in a way, they're under the same kind of umbrella, right? Like AI is giving us the capabilities to do stuff that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do, right? So it's unlocking doors. Yeah. And in specifically cases where people have some disability that they can overcome with that. That's awesome.
There are a lot of like time savings that we get. I mean, there are a lot of kind of routine drudgery tasks. I know, like, I like having notes when I'm in meetings with people, clients, that kind of thing. A lot of times when I'm in a meeting, I can take notes or I can participate in the meeting, but it's really hard for me to do both at the same time. And knowing that I've got, a recording and knowing that I've got something that's going to transcribe the thing for me and do a pretty good job, at least close enough that I'll remember, what the actual word was supposed to be, is a really useful thing and saves me a ton of time. So.
And this is where, so now we can push on like what it means to be doing virtue ethics a little bit. So you're right that certain AI and technology gives us access to more time, but that still leaves open the question of like whether the people who are using it and making access to that more time are better off, right? Are better people. So you can imagine a lot of folks, maybe I can imagine my dad saying something like this, where it's like, all these people who know how to, use the GPS on their phone to find places, right? But they couldn't look at a map and know how to navigate, the woods if they had to. Nobody knows how to use a compass themselves. And maybe that these technologies have become crutches that have made us like atrophy important parts of ourselves. In which case, these are not conducive to being more virtuous or better people. How does that sit with you?
I mean, two things can be true, right? Technologies can have mixed utility. There are some good things about it, and there are some bad things about them. And even that's true for even the same technology, right? So sure, there are downsides to lots of things, right? I mean, we've got so like if the power goes out in the city, right, the fact that none of the traffic lights are working means that everybody moves a lot slower, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that traffic lights are inherently bad, right? Just because it's really hard for us to navigate from one place to another. when all the traffic lights are turned off because we're having to stop at every intersection and figure out who's supposed to go next.
Yeah, I just wonder and this is going to be the test for a lot of these things. You're like, here is something that AI allows me to do, and it's got these benefits to me. I want to make sure that I'm not caught up in like the practical benefits, or that it feels good, or that it saves me time because it's making my life easier in some ways, but that might actually make me worse. So on the note-taking front, right? And this, I feel like maybe this should be a whole episode at some point. But I find myself really hesitant to use the note takers. And I notice a lot of people who do use the note takers just send me, oh, like, it's great. Here's a transcript, like a 5-page transcript of our meeting, or not transcript, but like a summary of our meeting. And I never read that because I don't have time to read that thing. Or when I have looked them at the past, the summaries aren't all that great. And I feel like it causes some people to pay worse attention in meetings because they're confident that the AI's got it. And so they're not doing the active listening that maybe they need to. And then they're relying on going and reading those notes. And, as a whole, they're just worse off than they were.
Yeah, I mean, so part of the question is, how responsible is the technology for the way that some particular person is using it, right? So, I believe, and who knows if I'm right, but I mean, I believe that I can pay attention better in meetings if I'm not having to write down notes to remember things. And that might be partly because of my ADHD and the fact that my short-term memory is not the best. But to me, I feel like it's a real benefit to me. I can see how that same tool could be used to make somebody not have to care about the meeting. What does that say about whether the tool is virtuous or not virtuous, right?
Yeah, good. And so this is we can talk loosely about whether a tool is virtuous or not. The idea is a person virtuous or not? Like, that's the core thing that can be virtuous or not. And then tools are virtuous insofar as they promote the virtue, but in particular persons. But as you're stating, that's going to be different for different people, right? In the same way that, there are some of you out there who are listening to this who, like, alcohol might make your weekend a little bit better, and there are others who it will ruin your weekend, right? Is alcohol a vice or a virtue? Depending on whether you're a teetotaler or not, maybe you think there's just like a hard and fast answer to that. But I think most people would say depends on how you're constituted. And maybe that's the same thing here. Like, AI note takers can free up your short-term memory, deficit or whatever, and allow you to spend that in more meaningful ways and be a more active listener, but they can ruin other people. And maybe I'm one of the people that's like, don't use note takers, Casey, because that makes you bad in these meetings. I don't know.
So do you actively take notes in meetings?
I actively do take notes in meetings, but I don't take a lot. Like, I'll have my, I've got my Emacs window over there, and like I'll throw down a few thoughts as they become important, I think. If anything, I like having recordings of meetings, and then I might go back and watch for a particular part, but I haven't found the AI note-taking to be helpful to me at all. And yeah, if anything, they give me the temptation to shut down a little bit.
So when I take notes, and this is probably just my generation, but when I take notes, I tend only to take notes longhand. And it's because I have found, and I've seen studies about this, and this actually bears on the topic to some extent, that for people that do longhand, for whom longhand is something that comes naturally, when you write something out by hand, you remember it better than if you type it. I'm not sure exactly why that is, if it just engages more of your brain or that kind of thing. But that kind of begs the question of, if you're someone who grew up doing only typing and you never really got used to longhand, is that a piece of memory that you've lost, right? Is that a technique that isn't valuable to you? And then the implications of that go into, like, if you're used to AI writing your papers for you, does that mean that you're not going to be able to write your papers, or that kind of thing, right? So there's this trade-off between, I've got this tool that makes it easier for me to do some things, but then by relying on that and by letting that become a crutch, there are things that if I don't have that tool anymore, I ought to have been able to do, but I can't. You and I have talked before offline about calculators. I have a physics degree. I had a professor in college, I remember once when he was asked, are we allowed to use calculators on the tests? And he said, oh, absolutely, because it will give those of you that are going to fail something to do with the hour that we're in the test. Because if you have to pull out a calculator and use a calculator on a physics test, in your college career, you're not going to have time to actually do the thinking to get through the actual calculus and the problems.
Yeah, there are two types of calculator tests, just like there are two types of open book tests, right? If you've got an open book test, you either know it's the easiest test you've ever taken, or it's going to be miserably hard, right? Like those are the two styles. Because there are some where like if you just haven't navigated the book enough and you have to look this stuff up, you're in so much trouble that it doesn't matter. And then there are the ones that are just like, we're just trying to give you an A. Like just go quote from the book, please. You have unlimited time. Yeah.
Going back to school though, I have heard a lot. Now I'm not in school anymore. My daughter's in college, so we don't have the same kind of relationship with school as we did when she was younger or when I was younger. But I have read a lot and seen a lot online about the cheating epidemic. I've heard it called, where basically kids can't do their homework anymore. Kids won't do their homework anymore. Everybody's using ChatGPT to write the essays, and all the teachers are using ChatGPT to grade the essays. And what are we even doing anymore? And that's an interesting question to talk about from the point of view of AI and ethics.
Yeah, that's great. And I think thinking about kids is a really important way to frame this stuff, because if people are having trouble figuring out, okay, how do I think about virtue ethics? One way is to say, if you're raising a kid, right, and you want them to have a successful, flourishing life, what makes you happy with how they're doing things? Like if you see your kid using a lot of ChatGPT to write their papers, is that causing you joy or not? My guess is it's not. For the most part. But maybe there's some out there who I want people who are leveraging the most cutting edge technology that they can, using all the tools at their disposal. And so if you've got an LLM that can help you write better and the end product is better, then of course that's the kind of thing that you should be using. But yeah, I suspect that, and this is an empirical question, maybe there's follow-up that we can do here. But I suspect that kids that are spending a lot of time leveraging, not doing their homework, leveraging these sort of tech tools, they're just not working the muscles that they need to have the skills, right? And it feels very different from, say, you or I using an LM to write an essay, I think. So if we both had to write some essay tomorrow, right, and submit it, maybe not for a college class, but we're writing some blog post or something. We've written enough essays by hand, right, and by typing them, that I can say, okay, ChatGPT, throw it out for me, and I'm going to go back and edit it, and I can have a critical eye because I've built these things myself. I can say, I don't like this structure, go do these other sorts of things. My fifth grader doesn't have the same experience under her belt, and so doing the same thing, she's going to be like, this looks good, this is better than the thing I could currently write, and they never have to struggle to put stuff together and learn those lessons the hard way.
Yeah, I was talking to some guys on one of the podcasts I was on, the Book Overflow podcast, and he was talking about how, he was working on a particular database thing that he hadn't spent much time on, and he's like, the AI is writing code that's way better than I could write. And I was like, yeah, but that's because you're a beginner, right? If you had been doing this particular kind of, I think they were database triggers, if you'd been working on those for, 5 or 10 years, then you'd look at what the AI spit out and gone, yeah, no, I wouldn't do it that way. It's really good for helping people do things when they're a beginner at that thing, at the cost of making it a lot harder for them to get past being a beginner and being able to actually learn how to do the thing on their own.
Maybe we can have our cake and eat it too a little bit, because this is something I've been struggling with. Yeah, I've built, if I want to build this new AI for this application I'm developing, and I use an LLM to help build it for me, can I do that to lower the barrier to entry but then go back and review the code line by line and rewrite it myself by hand. Is that a way to kind of get both of those, or you think I'm still missing out on something essential for becoming a good coder?
So, I mean, that's actually a technique that we use in coding a lot. When I was coming up using a thing called extreme programming, they called them spikes. In the agile methodologies, they call them tracer bullets. But the idea is basically you've got this complicated system that you're working on. You're trying to add a feature to it. It's not working right. It's just there are too many variables or too many moving pieces. So what you do is you basically move over to the side. You start a completely new, fresh project. You build the thing that you wanted to build all by itself, isolated, right? And then you say, cool, okay, so now I understand how it works. Now I've got this test bed I can experiment on. And now I can start moving the pieces of that thing that I built that's a standalone simplified version of what I wanted to build. I can start moving those over into my complicated project, and I can see how that impacts the project, right? That's a technique we do in programming all the time. And it's a technique that I use with AI all the time, right? I'll have it build a thing, and then I'll pull over the parts of it that I need that fit into what I'm trying to do. I'm not sure to what extent other people like that kind of, or do that kind of thing. Like I said, extreme programming was a thing that showed up in, 2003, 2004. So it's a thing I've been doing for 20 something years. I think it's really useful, but then if I didn't think it was really useful, I wouldn't have been doing it for 20 years. So I'm kind of biased in that regard.
That's fair. I'm still wondering why it gets the label of extreme. Like, it feels like you need to have a helmet on while you're programming in this way or something.
I don't know. It was extreme without an E. It was XTREME programming. I don't know. The guy that coined the term wrote a book called Extreme Programming, and that's where it came from. I don't know. I'm guessing it was just a marketing thing, like half of the other, like the way that we call everything AI, whether it's a special purpose narrow thing that does protein folding, or erotic chatbot that is take up people's time and maybe trying to sell the products.
Yeah. I'm happy to try and complete your sentences, but not one where you started with erotic chatbot. that I feel like is too dangerous.
That's fair.
So I think we've been talking about the right sort of it's like the methodology for thinking virtue ethics stuff, right? It's just like bring up a thing and think like, okay, is that conducive to making you the sort of person that you want to? And this is maybe we're both going to be too nuanced to take as many hard lines here, because there are costs and benefits to using AI in a whole bunch of different areas, right? So if you're a student and you are writing your test, or you're writing a final essay for your class, and you use an LLM to help you generate that essay, that gives you a lot more time. It quickly gets an essay on the page for you that you can work with. And so, like, let's just sort of explore like what the virtues and vices are in this space, right? It's a willingness to use tools, which is just cool and important, and like new technologies, that's great. I think a good person is someone who can pick up and adapt to new situations. It means that you are efficient at getting work out. I think generally speaking, if I had to, as quickly as possible, make a good 5-paragraph essay, I could write it myself from scratch, or I could use an LLM, and I could probably do it a little bit faster using an LLM, depending on where it's at. Maybe that'd be close because I've written so many 5-paragraph essays that I could churn it out. And it keeps you, well, I guess this is along those lines, it keeps you from procrastinating a little bit, maybe, by just sort of like...
It's easier to get started than staring at a blank page.
Absolutely. But then there's all sorts of vices in this area, right? Like one, I know we said we weren't going to talk about it too much because we sort of bracketed off at the beginning, like where these models are trained from. But to some extent, you are potentially stealing other people's work when you use an LLM to do these things. So there's some lying involved here and some like other bits of treachery and theft. There's a real temptation, and this is interesting, like just a flip side of the virtue version, right? Like I said, you're sort of more efficient. But I think people who are inclined to use LLMs might be inclined to think, I can do this whenever I want very quickly. And I would not be surprised to see that those people are more likely to procrastinate and just like do it at the last minute and generate it. If it's easy come, then I'm not going to invest as much time into it because I don't need to. Yeah, and there's I guess implicit in that there's a little bit of a laziness to this, right? Like I want something else to do the process rather than me being the real mover and generator of the content.
Right. Although we should acknowledge that generation after generation after generation for thousands of years, every generation, well, not every generation, but most generations of humans have looked at the technology that the younger generation has access to and said, "Oh, that's going to make them lazy," right? That was true. I mean, I've read essays, people talking about how literacy, letting people read books was going to ruin civilization and all this kind of stuff. So there's definitely a what I had to do, you ought to have to do as well.
Right.
I remember when I was a kid, our teachers used to tell us, well, it's not like, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket the rest of your life, right? And I do, actually. And it's a way more powerful calculator than they could have envisioned at the time. And I don't see how, I mean, it seems to me very unlikely that we're going to end up in a world where these kinds of tools are not going to continue to be more or less ubiquitous, right? And so some
Yeah.
way of knowing how to use the tool and how to be productive that way, I think is going to be important, and it's going to hopefully allow people to focus on their time on other things.
Yeah, in logic, where we talk about logical fallacies, right? There's the appeal to tradition, which says just because something's been done for a long time, therefore it's good or it's the right thing to do, right? And that's fallacious. There are lots of things we've been doing for a long time that are terrible, right?
Right.
And then the flip side of that is the appeal to novelty. Because something is good, it's a new piece of technology, then we should be using that. Like both of those are fallacious. There are lots of things we've been doing for a long time that are good. The reason we've been doing them for a long time is because there's something like meaningful and worthwhile about them.
Right.
And there are a bunch of new things that are in fact good. But the flip side of both of those are true. And this is kind of what I think we're trying to do here is like not be the old man yelling at cloud situation of stop using AI technologies, go back to do things the way that we were, but to be critical about it. Like, okay, what am I getting out of using this AI? Is it helping me be better? Is it filling a gap that I have, or is it letting me focus on something that I'm struggling with? And if it's doing that stuff, then great. I think too few people are really reflective about the tools that they're using here and how it's changing them as a person.
Right. Now, there's the flip side of the whole thing, though, right? We've kind of tried so far in this episode to be more on the positive side. There are certainly things that people are doing with AI that, at least in my world, are absolutely 100% negative, right? So there are, it has made fraud so much easier, right? It has made spam so much more effective. It has made, a lot of scams, a whole lot. I've read about like voice changing scams where people call and they sound like your boss or they sound like one of your relatives and they ask for, I'm stuck and I need money or, that kind of thing, right? There's been a lot of security issues with, online stuff that AI has facilitated. We're not going to get too deep into that because that could be its own whole series of episodes probably. There's a problem with generation of non-consensual intimate imagery is the word that they use. Taking people and turning pictures of them into what appears to be nude pictures of them, which is a horrific thing that should not be allowed. But on the other hand, it's not the kind of thing that's really easy to avoid once the tools exist.
Right. And there's also the in the picture that you talked about where students are creating work and then teachers are reading that work. A lot of interpersonal communication, I feel like now, is mediated by artificial intelligence and on both sides, and that has a negative impact on our interpersonal connections as well as our ability to make those sorts of connections and communicate. And that I'm very worried about. Now that feels a lot like the old man yelling at cloud, where you just like complain about jargon in text messages. But I do think I have experienced this, and I have a lot of like teacher friends who are like, no, there's something different here. It's not just that high schoolers are, speaking differently than they used to. Like there are some real worries that we're having a generation that is not as capable as previous generations for communication.
Yeah, I mean, there's this phenomenon called signal collapse, where basically in the past we have been able to approximate the amount of effort that went into something, right, by looking at the output of that, right, and we've now broken that connection. So, for example, in the world where people are doing hiring, right, there used to be a way that you could look at a resume and you could look at the cover letter and you could see how much effort someone seems to have put into wanting to apply for the job that you're in. Now, all of the resumes look perfect and they're exactly what the job description requires. All of the cover letters sound exactly personal. Although I've heard from recruiter friends of mine that sometimes they end up calling up the candidate and they're ready to start an interview, and the candidate doesn't even know what was on the resume that they submitted because the AI did it for them. Right. And then all that generally started being a defense against the fact that employers first started using AI tools, or at least automated tools. I don't know exactly whether they're neural nets inside or what, but started using automated tools to screen resumes before a human ever saw them. And so that meant that that applicants felt that they needed to make sure that all of the keywords were exactly right. And it's just escalated to the point where you can't look at a resume or a cover letter or anything like that and come up with any approximation of whether or not the person on the other end of that is sincere or, cares or put in effort or anything like that.
Yeah. And so it just, destroys the value of a lot of these modes of communication entirely.
Yeah. It's also been a big problem. I read something not too long ago about bug submissions, and about how in the old days when you were a software maintainer of a project and someone put in a big, long, complicated, okay, I tried this and I tried this and I tried this and I tried this and this is the problem that I had, and blah, blah, blah. That was an indication that someone was being sincere and they were actually trying, and that the problem that they say that they found was probably real. None of that's true anymore, right? And now all of that can be hallucinated, and a lot of times you get these really, really intricate looking, very professional sounding bug reports that are reporting a bug in a part of the project that doesn't even exist, with a function that there is no function by that name. So it's that lack of faith, the lack of, we haven't even really talked about, disinformation or fake news or fake video or that kind of thing. The lack of faith that we have now, or that we're developing in things that we see and things that we used to be able to trust that we can't anymore. I don't know what the implications to society of that are going to be, but I can't imagine they're going to be good.
I have, maybe this is the contrarian in me. Partly, we can't be too Pollyannish about like how much we were getting lied to and couldn't trust things in the past, right? There have been ways to make up quotes and
Sure.
deceive us previously. One thing that I hope that we get positive out of like how ubiquitous and easy it is to push misinformation now is if we handle it right, we will get more people who are better at being critical, right? Consumers of information. I don't think we have that yet, but in the same way that, there was the worry as soon as we were using LLMs to generate images of people, and people are like, wait, count the fingers. Are there 5 fingers? Right? Like we start developing these skills of, okay, how can I test the credibility of this thing? And I don't take for granted that just because there's a picture of it, that it actually happened. And that's good. That's good and bad. Hopefully we can leverage this to make more people who are better at evaluating how likely something is to be true and not just take stuff at face value.
I mean, hopefully to some extent. I mean, the problem is, same with the signal collapse. We used to be able to look at a photo or read a news report or whatever, and it was hard to make a professional sounding, completely made up news report in a way that it's not anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And so we've also broken the ability to approximate the credibility of a source or the credibility of a report by being able to look at the language and look at the structure and that kind of thing. So we've created this situation where a lot of the context cues that we used to be able to rely on are no longer useful. And we don't know to what extent those are going to be able to be replaced. Right.
Yeah.
And yes, there was this, count the fingers thing, but that only lasted for what, 6 months, a year, a couple of years, maybe. It's not a problem anymore. So now we have to find a different set of context cues, and there's no telling how long those are going to actually be valid.
Right. Another thing that we haven't talked about much here today, I think is important, and this also traces a little bit back to where the material comes from. But it's a problem that's only going to get worse, which is that if the training data, right, is from the internet, which mostly it is, right? We're pulling from all these forums and stuff like that. And now AI is populating the internet with its own generated material, right? We get this vicious cycle where the average quality is not going up, it's going down, right? It's feeding into itself. And this will translate into the arts and literature and things as well, right? We have more worry that children's entertainment or something like that can just be an AI-generated version of Cocomelon, which was already a little disconcerting before and is probably not improving, although thank goodness my children are no longer consuming any of that stuff. But when we talk about, okay, like what sorts of humans do we want to be? We want to be like cultured people who are consuming good and quality stuff. And AI is not helping that happen for the most part, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's also creating a real curation problem, right? Because, even if you don't, I mean, even without talking about the quality of what AI puts out, the volume of what AI puts out, right, is huge. I've heard statistics about the number of new AI-generated songs that show up on Spotify every day, the number of new AI-created Kindle books that show up in the Kindle bookstore every day. And it makes it that much harder for someone who's got legitimate work that, were it to be noticed, could become, very valuable and could reach an audience. It just makes it that much harder for those kinds of people to be able to make a living in the arts, or to be noticed, or to be able to turn a hobby into a profession, kind of thing. And that's, in my mind, that means we've lost something.
Yeah. And we've been, so now we've been like sort of, we've talked a little pro AI, like it's conducive to some virtues. We've done some con AI, which I think was decidedly more of our content, which I think leans towards how both you and I feel about things. Like we want to use AI, but I've got more concerns about it degrading the quality of life than I do improving.
Me too.
We should probably talk in a second about solutions to this stuff, right? Like, okay, if AI is making the world worse in these ways and better in these ways, like how can we go about improving our quality of life as much as possible? Can we take the good and get rid of the bad? And I think the first step on that is to like and subscribe to this podcast. But in seriousness, like, stop and think, like, how am I using this stuff? Is it making my life better, right? In the same way that how many times a day do you go to and scroll Facebook? Not really any for me anymore, but part of the reason for that is I stopped. I was like, this is a waste of my time. And like, I'm just doing it out of habit, but like, what am I getting out of it? So just, can you be more reflective about how am I using these tools? What is it bringing to me? Is the juice worth the squeeze, kind of a thing. So make sure that you're doing that out there. What advice do you give?
So we need to think about the kinds of backstops and rules and societal norms that we've been accustomed to, and how those have been changing, and whether or not we actually want those to change. Decide for yourself whether you want to try to seek out creators that are explicitly human, right? Do you want to try to find more and more platforms, I think, are at least advertising that they're going to be marking AI content as such? Is that a thing that you, as a viewer or as a listener or as a reader, want to pay attention to? Is it a thing you want to avoid? Do you care if there's AI in the media you consume? Or is it a thing that you want to make absolutely sure you only read stuff that came from a human? We all, I mean, there's the what AI is potentially going to be doing to society, and we'll see how that evolves over time because there's a lot of variables there and it's hard to say. But we all have our own decisions to make about how we engage with it. And yes, there's the how we engage with the chatbots, right? And under what circumstances do we, ask it questions versus a normal search or whatever? Not that you can do a normal Google search anymore, but that's a whole different rant. But deciding, for each of us, for ourselves, what we're comfortable with and what we think is useful in terms of things that are AI generated versus things that came from a human. And, are you going to be really binary about that? Is there, do you have a problem with spell check? Do you have a problem with, grammar check? Do you have a problem? It's like at what point for you is there a line that says, okay, that's too much AI. I don't want to deal with that thing anymore.
Yeah. I'm getting more blue underlines in my emails, and I'm finding that maybe this is a sign that my grammar is degrading or that they're just trying to integrate it more. But yeah, I have that struggle where like I right click and I'm like, that changing of words is fine, right? Like I don't object to it, but it's also not the thing I wrote the first time. And more now I'm rejecting those changes. We're like, obviously I'll check them, and it's like, oh yeah, I screwed something up. That was ungrammatical. But there are other times you're like, yeah, what you said is simpler, and like I used a little bit of passive voice. But also that happened to be my voice, and like I want more of my human voice to come through in my emails, all my communications.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that it flags that drive me crazy. I have a tendency to say things like, it's not unlike a thing, right? Which to me is different than it is like a thing, right?
Yeah.
There's like the subtle degrees in there when you start combining words like that, and the AI tools are just like, no, just make it simpler. It's like, no, I don't want to make it simpler. I'm trying to be clear.
And they also, whoever had a chance to program this, or I guess, again, it's just training data, right? But there's enough cautionary tales or forbidding of ending a sentence with a preposition that it still flags me on that every time. And I'm like, it's fine. People are okay ending a sentence with a preposition now. We need to stop dying on that hill. Apologies to the two of you in the audience who that offends. So the way that, we've been talking virtue ethics, we should give Aristotle like at least a little bit of lip service here because he is the virtue ethics guy, right? If I'm recommending you read one piece of philosophy, it's probably my dissertation, but then it would be Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, which I think is fabulous, accessible to everybody. But the way that Aristotle thinks about ethics, and I'm sure most of you know this, maybe you didn't know that you knew something about Aristotle's ethics here, but he talks about the golden mean. And his golden mean is every virtue, right? You have some character trait, and you can have an excess or you can have a deficiency of that character trait, and like right that sweet spot, that Goldilocks zone in the middle, that's what having the virtue is. So the classic example is something like bravery is a virtue, and I forget what the personality trait is listed often, but if you've got too much of it, you're like brash, you're overly bold. And you like run into battle and get slaughtered, 1 versus 1,000. That's a bad character trait. That's just stupid. And then the deficiency of it is cowardice. You just run away, right? Was it Brave Sir Robin runs away for our Monty Python fans? So you want to have bravery just like right in the middle of that, right? And so I think that's actually been coming up in a lot of the things that we're talking about. Where, okay, am I lazy by using an LLM? Or am I like efficient when I use an LLM? Or that can be like, how hard am I willing to work, right? And I'm leveraging this piece of technology. So if you're someone who really struggles with doing the hard work, maybe it's good for you to like set down the AI system. So you're using them as crutches. It's keeping you from like going and doing stuff. You're just trying to cheat and get by the whole time with AI doing it. On the other hand, if you're one of those people who's like, no, I need to, like, I don't even type anymore. I use calligraphy and I like carefully letter each word. I send it by carrier pigeon, and it's tough because I'm having trouble communicating with all of my friends this way. You're like, okay, well, you're you have the opposite problem, right? Like, how can we use some automation to like lower the barrier to entry for you? And then you can put like the hard work into the birthday card or something like that, and not the, writing out of the grocery list. Like you just need to be recalibrated. So I guess in that like self-reflection stuff and thinking about ways that you can set your boundaries, it's like, look at yourself and say, like, what character trait am I trying to maximize here? And am I sort of leaning too far to one direction or another off the balance beam?
Yeah, everything in moderation, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. One of my worries, as someone who, and you can ask my wife, tends to have too big of an ego, or like think all of my ideas are too good, right? The sycophancy issue with chatbots was a concern. But I feel like, and this is where how much self-deception is going on, right? But I'm trying more and more when I write an idea for one of my YouTube videos, or I think like, here's a proposal I want to make at work. I can try throwing into a couple of different chatbots. Like, I'll put my idea, and you'll be like, somebody, a colleague who I think is really dumb wrote this. What's wrong with it? Like, maybe I can try and get the sycophancy to actually work in my favor if we're talking to someone else. Maybe Gemini's like, we know this is about you. Like, why are you pretending this is someone else? Yeah, but that's one thing I try for. But it's one reason why I think I leaned away from using as many LLMs too, is because I was like, I think I'm just going to end up in a loop where I like my own ideas more than I ought to.
Yeah, I mean, it's useful in kind of a like, what am I missing context, right? So like when I'm working on videos sometimes, and I'm like, okay, what are the counter arguments to this? What are the what are the things that I'm missing? What are the kinds of things that other people who have talked about this topic have also brought up that aren't in my script, kind of things? That has helped me kind of identify where my blind spots are, at least in theory, at least some of them.
Yeah, good. And that's the kind of thing where, so maybe we say the character trait here is something like originality or something, right? Where if you have like the perfect amount is like your own unique beautiful butterfly. But if you have too much of it, like you're just missing obvious things that other people know, right? You're just wrong about stuff or missing that sort of context. And if you don't have enough of it, you are AI slop. Like you are just recycling content that's already out there. And the kind of stuff that I hope that we can bring on this channel is the stuff that sits in between, where we bring our own unique flavor to stuff. And we've seen enough of the content that's out there that we're not leaving massive parts of it out, but we're still giving you the slice and the flavor that we have that's different.
And I think that sounds like a good thing to go out on.
Yeah. You're all your own unique butterflies. use AI to make yourselves flourish.
Thanks, everybody. And we will see you next time, hopefully, on Philosophy Programs and Prompts.